Today's rundown enters the never-ending plot of the movie Triangle, a story of a troubled single mother whose life is twisted when she finds herself trapped in a time loop, repeating the same sequence of events over and over again. The story opens with a young lady named Jess, comforting her frightened little son. She soothes him with tears in her eyes and says, "You're just having a bad dream." Jess lives with her son in the suburbs of Florida. On a bright Saturday morning, it looks like she is getting ready to go somewhere, urging her son Tommy that it's getting late. We see Tommy painting a picture and subsequently, Jess, with an air of frustration, cleaning the spilled paint. The chore leaves a blot on her gown, adding to her exasperation, but she is distracted by someone ringing the bell. When Jess goes to the front door, there's no one. She asks her old lawn mowing neighbor whether he saw anyone in front of her house, but he says no. Jess packs her bags, takes the house keys, and persuades her disturbed son to get into the car. Jess is driving towards Florida Harbor for a yacht trip with her friend Greg, who is seen preparing his yacht for the trip. He is soon joined by his friends and married couple, Sally and Downey. Sally has brought a beautiful friend of hers, Heather, obviously to hook her up with the still single Greg. However, Greg is not much interested to get into a relationship and is distracted by Jess, who arrives at the dock, accompanied by Greg's young muscular deckhand, Victor. Jess looks depressed and is dressed in shorts and a white t-shirt. When Greg runs to greet her and ask if she is okay, she appears confused and is unable to answer properly. Jess half hugs Greg before getting into the yacht, and Greg introduces her to his friends. They set sail into the ocean with the clear blue skies promising them an enjoyable trip. The very tired and disturbed Jess sleeps in the cabin. She wakes up from a dream where she is washed up on a shore. Heather offers her a glass of champagne, and she takes it happily. At the yacht deck, Greg asks Victor why Jess didn't look good when they arrived earlier. Victor says that when he encountered her in the harbor, Jess looked disoriented and couldn't immediately remember where her son Tommy was. It was expected that Jess would bring Tommy with her, but she told Victor that she left him at school. Heather and Jess also show up at the deck and join everyone else. Greg is concerned about Jess, who works as a waitress. It seems Greg struck up a friendship with Jess by frequenting the diner where she works. Sally disapproves of Greg's closeness with Jess and wants him to hook up with her friend Heather. There's also something not right with Jess, as she doesn't remember Greg inviting her for the sailing trip the day before. Jess then shares with Greg the difficulties of bringing up Tommy. She also confesses that she feels guilty every moment she is away from Tommy, which somehow explains her dispirited presence. Soon, Victor alerts everyone that the wind has completely died down, which looks weird to them. Downey then sees an approaching storm and dark, intimidating clouds which currently looks miles away from them. However, the storm arrives on top of them in a matter of seconds like a magic and instantaneously replaces the clear blue skies. Greg connects with the Coast Guard on the radio and conveys their predicament. The communication is cut short as Greg hears a distressed caller on the radio calling for help. The female voice says everyone is dead and that they're killing everyone. Greg asks for their coordinates, but the communication is completely cut off. The storm eventually covers this part of the ocean and hits them fiercely. The large waves threaten to overturn the puny-looking yacht. Victor and Greg are on the deck, trying to avert the disaster, whereas the rest are wearing life jackets and pinned to the cabin. An extremely large wave eventually overturns the yacht and throws everyone into the dark ocean. It appears that Heather tragically got drowned in the disaster, and the remaining crew members swim back together. The freak storm passes quickly as rapidly as it hailed out of nowhere. The clear blue skies return once again, and the fatigued five sit upon the overturned boat. Greg talks to Jess about her son Tommy and says that he will be fine until they get back home. Jess and the others then spot a large cruise ship named Aeolus that floats into their view. The survivors finally feel a hope of living as they see someone looking at them from the deck. They quickly board the ship as soon as it arrives closer to their overturned yacht. They arrive at the deck, and Jess seems to have some strange feelings about everything. Victor calls for somebody's attention, but no one responds. They decide to go inside the ship and look for someone from the crew. As the five moves through the desolate corridors to make their way to the captain's cabin, it seems like there's no one on the ship. Jess is increasingly hit with feelings of déjà vu and somberly states that she knows this place and recognizes the corridor. Downey diverts their attention to an old framed picture of the ship in the corridor. It says Aeolus was made in 1932 and explains that in Greek mythology, Aeolus is the father of Sisyphus, the man condemned by the gods to push a rock up a mountain for eternity. Subsequently, they hear the sound of something falling on the ground. Victor and Greg investigate it. Victor comes back with a pair of keys, and Jess surprisingly recognizes it as hers, which has the locket picture of her son and matches the one Jess is wearing as a chain. Jess swears that she had the keys when she boarded the yacht. Sally, who still hopes that Heather is alive, says it might be her friend who ended up with the keys and dropped them in the corridor. The implausibility of such a scenario is immediately doubted. Next, the five stumble into a ballroom with a neatly arranged feast. Jess sees someone in the mirror reflection and alerts the others. Victor immediately goes in search of this mysterious stranger, but finds no one. Greg and Jess leave to find the captain, asking Sally and Downey to wait for Victor. Jess once again emphasizes her feelings of déjà vu, but Greg is unable to believe her. Their attention is drawn to room 237 in the corridor, where they hear a sound of a running shower. Inside the room's bathroom mirror, they find a message written in blood which says "Go to theater." Victor is still searching for the ship's inhabitant and has reached the upper deck. Meanwhile, Greg dismisses the blood message as some prank by the invisible ship's crew, whereas Jess is thoroughly spooked. As a result, Greg and Jess have a mild altercation. She returns to the ballroom as Greg walks toward the theater. Downey and Sally are also on their way to the theater for some unknown reason. They find a trail of blood from the upper deck, which eventually leads them to the theater. They simply ignore that blood trail and search the theater. Jess is back at the ballroom and is surprised to find all the food moldy. She's also shocked to find a bloodied Victor entering just after her. He attacks her and tries to strangle her. She finds a nasty gash on the back of his head and kills him simply by pushing him aside. Jess runs to the theater, only to find Greg with a large bullet wound. Sally and Downey are hysterical and accuse Jess of killing Greg because they were allegedly the last words of Greg. Downey questions Jess on why she asked them to come to the theater. Jess denies meeting them on her way to the ballroom after being with Greg. Before finding an answer to this confusion, Sally is gunned down by some masked figure in the upper gallery of the theater. Both Sally and Downey perish due to the bullet wounds, while Jess manages to escape. She arrives at the kitchen area and grabs a knife. The masked killer is chasing her, and a somewhat intense scene of search begins. Jess runs to the upper deck, but the killer arrives and holds her at gunpoint. Jess surprisingly dodges the gunshot from so close and overpowers the murderer. She grabs a fire axe while running and prepares to confront the killer. They eventually fight, and Jess once more takes control. Intimidated by the axe in Jess's hands, the masked figure mutters, "It's the only way to get home," and repeats the phrase, "Kill them all." Jess takes a swing with her axe, and the killer falls off the ship into the ocean. However, it's unclear whether the killer survived or not, because we all know that people can swim in the water. Anyway, Jess doesn't get much time to reflect on the traumatic incident. She hears voices and witnesses the same stranded five, including another version of herself, waving from the overturned yacht. Now it becomes clear that the someone the previous group of five saw at the upper deck is another lone survivor. Therefore, this causes the audience to anticipate that Jess might be the masked killer. The new group of five board the cruise ship, and everything happens just as it is supposed to happen. The survivor Jess spies on the newly boarded Jess, who is hit with feelings of déjà vu. The same sequence of events happen as the survivor Jess keeps following them. The survivor Jess then drops the keys and runs away in terror. At the same time, the survivor Jess unearths more mysteries as she traverses through the seemingly abandoned ship. She goes to the same room 237 from earlier and finds the message written in blood, but it's still unclear who wrote it. She then goes to the ballroom where the newly boarded group is present. The new Jess catches a glimpse of her in the mirror, and new Victor goes to find the mysterious stranger. The survivor Jess goes to the deck and finds the corpse of Downey floating in the ocean, feasted by the seagulls. The same sequence of events happen, and Victor comes across this survivor Jess. She tries to explain to him that there is a copy of herself downstairs and that they're all going to die. Naturally, Victor doesn't trust the survivor Jess's words, and soon she accidentally causes the gash in his head by pushing him against the wall. She runs away, and it is now made clear why Victor wanted to strangle her earlier. Finally, she ends up at the crew cabin and finds a bunch of notes, all saying if they board, kill them all. The survivor Jess also writes one, confirming that it's her own handwriting in all the crumpled notes. She finds the crew uniform which the masked killer was wearing, and now we all know where this is going. She also finds a bunch of heart-shaped pendant lockets containing pics of herself and her son. While looking down at the grate, her chain locket is pulled and rests with the pile. The survivor Jess then takes the shotgun and ammunition and first encounters Victor in the corridor on her way to the ballroom. She hides in the ballroom as the new Jess encounters the bloodied Victor. However, what happens next didn't happen in the previous loop. The survivor Jess encounters her other self, makes her run away in shock, and consequently stops her from accidentally killing Victor. Nevertheless, Victor seems to have lost too much blood, so he will still be dead soon. By the time the survivor Jess reaches the theater, but the new Greg is already shot and dead. Before the masked killer from above kill new Sally and new Downey, the survivor Jess shoots at the killer, causing a flesh wound in the killer's head. The new Downey and Sally are confused about what's going on. The survivor Jess gives the gun to Downey and runs off to get Victor. However, the blood trail indicates that he is dragged and thrown overboard. Meanwhile, Downey starts shooting at someone. The masked killer hiding from the couple takes off the mask, and obviously, it is another version of Jess. The blood on her head makes it clear that she was injured by the survivor Jess. Nevertheless, this mean unmasked version of Jess persuades the couple to follow her. She takes them to the same room 237, uses her knife to slash Downey's throat, and also stabs Sally in the stomach. The injured Sally slips away while Jess repeatedly stabs Downey and kills him. It's surprising to see that Sally is running completely fine even after getting stabbed in her stomach. Anyway, while running from the murderous Jess, Sally comes across a radio and asks for help. This message goes straight to the Greg, whose yacht is yet to be overturned by the storm. The survivor Jess is also running around and looking for Sally. She finally ends up on the uppermost deck, where many versions of Sally are lying lifeless with seagulls pecking at the corpses. The newly dying Sally is also there, and the survivor Jess consoles her. She then witnesses the fight between the new Jess and the unmasked Jess who murdered Downey. Contrary to what happened before, the unmasked Jess is bludgeoned to death this time, and her corpse is thrown off the ship. The survivor Jess once more consoles the dying Sally, but she is unable to hold on long enough and dies because of her injury. A few moments later, the new Jess witnesses another group of 5 and a new cycle starts. The survivor Jess goes to the engine room and tries to stop the ship in order to exit the loop but fails. It becomes clear that within a time loop, there are 3 versions of Jess, the one with feelings of deja vu, the survivor, and the killer. However, events in the 2 time loops we witnessed differed slightly, though the outcome was more or less similar. This survivor Jess, aka the original Jess, is now a silent observer, following the movements of those bound to repeat the events. She goes into full-fledged action mode, completely detaching herself from others. The original Jess goes to room 237 to find the corpse of Downey. She disposes of it and writes the message with his blood in the bathroom mirror. She also takes away Greg's corpse in the theater and visits the new set of Downey and Sally to tell them to go to the theater. Now she wears the uniform, a mask with 2 eye holes, and carries a shotgun. First, she points her gun at the new Greg, who identifies her by looking at the slippers. Though it doesn't make any sense to Greg, the original Jess promises to break the loop. He tries to talk her out, but she shoots him, and Sally, and also Downey. The new version of Jess escapes, just like what happened during the first time loop. The chaser is now the one who was chased. The same sequence of events repeat, and the survivor Jess is overpowered by the other Jess. Before jumping off the liner, our original masked Jess says to the other one, "It's the only way to save our son, and that you have to kill them." The original Jess is thrown into the ocean and is washed up on the shores. It's the same scene from her dream while napping in the yacht cabin earlier. She gets back on her feet and walks towards the city, eventually finding her way home from the beach. Once again, it's Saturday, and the original Jess finds the Jess who is yet to board the yacht. The Jess we find inside the home differs from the loving mother image we initially received. She yells at Tommy for leaving the toy yacht ship in the garden. The paint falls down the floor when Tommy looks at our original Jess outside his window and panics. The enraged other Jess beats the boy and screams in rage. Upon witnessing all this, the original Jess instantly cooks up a plan. She rings the doorbell, and when the other Jess is distracted, she gets a hammer from the backyard, enters the home, and brutally kills the angry Jess. Tommy gets a glimpse of this, and it's when she consoles her boy by telling him that it's all a bad dream. Now the fragmented or disjointed nature of the film's opening scene is made clear. The original Jess packs the dress and the corpse in a large bag. She also takes the locket chain from the dead woman, the one that fell down the grate in the ship. She puts the bag in the trunk and gets into the car with Tommy. While driving towards the harbor, she promises that she won't hit Tommy hereafter and assures him that she is a nice mommy. As she calms him, a seagull crashes into the car's windshield. The original Jess stops the car, takes the dead bird, and goes to throw it on the beach. After throwing it, she sees a pile of seagulls thrown at the exact spot. It reminds us of the images of the pile of crumpled papers, locket chains, and dead Sallys. It becomes clear to Jess that everything is still predestined and the loop is never going to end. She starts driving again, but Tommy screams at the blood on the windshield. While original Jess is momentarily distracted by Tommy's screams, the car veers a little and gets thrown off after mildly crashing with a large truck. Everyone rushes to the spot, and we see the dead Jess from the car trunk and Tommy, who is beyond saving. The original Jess looks at them, and she doesn't even have a single scratch on her body. No one notices her except for a man who simply calls himself a driver. She asks him to take her to the harbor, which is understandable. The driver asks if she'll come back, to which she replies, yes. She reaches the dock and sees Victor, who asks her about Tommy. She goes to Greg, hugs him, and joins the others in the yacht to set sailing. The loop continues. The screen cuts to black and the movie never ends.